Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny meeting on 20th of September. Just to advise that the meeting is a public meeting and it will be live streamed on YouTube channel. Before I actually get into any of the agenda, I would like to just hold a minute's silence in commemoration of Her Majesty the Queen, if everyone's agreed. So, agenda item 1, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? Nope. Apologies for absence and substitutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I've received apologies from Councillors Bowman and Potter, and substitute today for Councillor Bowman is Councillor Clancy.
Thank you. Next is Chairman announcements. I have no announcements. Item 4, public speaking.
None, Chairman.
No public speaking. Thank you.
Can you just make a note that we haven't had the minutes as well, just so that's on record?
Yeah, the minutes will be out with the next agenda. So moving on to item 5, which is the Cabinet reports. So I'll take you to the Cabinet report. So the first item is page 28 of the Cabinet report. Welcome to Sinead and Sean.
Thank you, Chair. So unfortunately, you've not got Sinead today. You have me. So me and Sean will be doing a double act on the report today. So taking the report as read, the report has 3 key recommendations. The first is to recommend to the agreement of funding to establish a business intelligence service, and that's set out in section 4.7 of the report. The second is to recommend that funding for 22-23 is drawn from the corporate contingency. And the third, to recommend that funding for the business intelligence service is built into the base budget for 23-24 going forward. So a quick overview of the report. So what is business intelligence? So business intelligence is use of data, assets and technology that will enable us to drive strategic decision making. So using data and insight to be able to better adapt our strategic plan and to be agile to the changes of the environment, and using the data and insight to help support those decisions. We also have the use of data and insights to support our continuous improvement approach. So we continually look at our services and look to see how we can improve them and deliver sort of first-class customer service as an outcome of that. So the use of data and insight and the efficiency in terms of using the use of data and insight in this report and the approach that we're bringing to you today will help with the delivery of that approach. So to identify those transformation initiatives that enable us to deliver services in a different way. And thirdly, touched on this a second ago around delivering first-class customer service. So using data, insight and intelligence to better understand how we can improve our services for our customers. So the report that you see today supports the clear priorities that were set out in the strategic plan for 2020 to 2024. In the strategic plan, we set out that we would like to utilise evidence, data and technology to help us deliver a first-class customer service. The business intelligence proposal that you've got here today helps support the achievement of that initiative in that strategic plan. So just a little bit more in terms of some examples that potentially business intelligence could provide for us. So investing in business intelligence service will enable us to better target our services to those most in need. So if we think about being able to use data and insight to identify the most vulnerable in our community, and therefore how can we better target our services to those vulnerable people so they have access to the right services at the right time. Data, insight and intelligence will enable us to do that. Also, prevention and prediction. So building on some of the great prevention work that we already do around being able to anticipate and use data to and predictive analytics to anticipate challenges and therefore where we may need to better focus our resource. So a recent example of this, using another council, they've been able to use predictive analytics to anticipate homelessness needs, and off the back of what the data intelligence is telling them, they've been able to change their service to better meet the need of that homelessness service that it delivers to its customers. And ultimately, I guess the output of that is reducing cost further down the line in terms of business, in terms of prevention and the use of our services. And lastly, the ability to be able to draw multiple data sets into a picture. So if we think about our telephony data, at the moment we look at the telephony channel, but there's a wider remit there around actually how do we manage demand across all of our channels, so email, website, social media. And as we plan to expand them channels, it's about this BI approach, bringing all of that information together to get a wider picture of our and manage our demand down those channels and ultimately provide a better customer service. So the report asks for some funding in relation to that. If you look at section 4.5, that's laid out on a year-by-year basis. We are seeking to use that investment to bring in more senior data analysts to help us support the build out of this approach. You'll see in 22-23, we are asking for just over £20,000 worth of funding to support that in year one, and increasing to 84,000 by the 5th year from the Broadland District Council perspective. So that's everything for me, and I'll open the floor to questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have questions? Sue, Ken, Jen?
Thank you, Corinne. You say that you can use it to predict. So, for example, the previous council you've given an example of is looking at homelessness. Presumably that will also be monitored afterwards to make sure that that has actually been effective and is correct, because we all know there are slight dangers with statistics, don't we? So perhaps you could reassure us on that.
Yes, thank you. So most definitely it relates to our continuous improvement approach. So it won't be you just measure at one point in time. It's a continuous ongoing measurement, and actually the benefit of bringing the data in a way that's more efficient, so therefore you have that data at the click of the button, you can actually adapt quicker than what we can at the moment. So currently we have to pull data from lots of different multiple systems. It takes a lot of time to manually collate that data, sometimes up to 2 hours to be able to do that. Actually, if you could do that at the click of a button, you can monitor at set points of your project, which allows you to adapt as that project progresses, as opposed to getting to the end and then reevaluating it. So most definitely. Thank you.
Sue, Ken?
Yes, good morning. Thank you for your report. I'm chairman of the Environmental Excellence Panel, and I noticed one of the bullet points in here, 2.3, protecting and improving the natural built environment while maximising quality of life. How are we actually going to utilise that information and the results? And how do we know at the end of possibly a year whether it's achieving what you're looking for, and whether the information that will come back to me and my panel will be worthwhile? I'd just like your comments on that, please.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. So there's two parts to this. The first part is the system being an enabler, and therefore once we've collected the information, it allows us to better target those projects, of which some of the projects could come out within that would come to your panel, Councillor Kelly. But in terms of, we don't know what they are until we get the data together to see what they look like, and therefore where can the impact be seen. I think the second part around how will it achieve that principle set out, I think in terms of the quality of life, it's definitely a big impacting factor around the prevention and prediction element that I spoke through earlier, in terms of if we can better prevent and predict, we can better adapt our strategy, in which then we can put in interventions at certain points of time that ultimately will improve quality of life. Thank you.
Yeah, and the report coming from it, say at the end of the year, are we going to get an update of actually has it achieved or has it not achieved what we were looking for?
So in terms of the service itself, the service is an enabler. So what it will enable us to do is start to identify projects that ultimately you will see as they come through into the arenas themselves, in terms of committees or cabinets going forward. So it's an enabler in which it won't actually give you at this point the savings. We've got to invest to find out where we can save at a certain point in time, and then I better target those transformation initiatives. She'll see the outputs in the round in terms of the projects that come forward that have been identified off the back of the business intelligence approach.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just ask Emma to just come in as well?
And just to add, this is probably one of those ones, Councillor Kelly, that could probably fall between panels or SEAC, depending on how you want to do the review. So we'll work to look at where we'll put this in, where we review it and where we report it back into. So it may be that we do a broader report that goes into SEAC to look at what SEAC's there to look at, or it may be that we want to drill into it. So we'll work with chairman of the committees as we progress that through.
Okay, thank you, Emma.
Thank you. Jen was next on my list.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So just following on from Councillor Kelly, there are some assumptions here that it will be better for us. So have you done some sort of cost-benefit analysis on this? Because I'm conscious that other councils, as you've said in the report, have been using these services. So, for example, I think Norfolk County Council have been using Power BI for a number of years now. So we should be able to get some idea of, the benefit, if you like, because it is a significant investment.
I think it's very difficult to measure, to predict what we don't know. So what we know is that we've got data all over our organisation, right across the organisation, but we can't easily access that data. We can't bring it together and map it against other pieces of data that we hold. So I think that the challenge for us has been, we could come in here with some very high level predictions about what savings might deliver, but that I felt that would be committing to something that we couldn't guarantee for you, but we know that by bringing the data together, we will generate those savings. There's some immediate benefits to us. I think once we can automate some of the data collection, we have a lot of people who just gather data for us now. Those people, if we can produce that data in an automated way, we'll release them to actually run analysis on the data rather than the gathering part of the data. Something like about 6.35 full-time equivalent is used just gathering data across our organisation. It involves about 51 people, not their whole job, but little parts of their job. We know that if we could release those people to actually run some analysis on that data, they will find efficiencies in the services that we can run. So don't have any hard figures to give you, but we know that by bringing data together, we will start to find those savings.
Take that one. Oh, I think is that one on? Oh, it's on anyway. Sorry. So the issue is around. I mean, part of using this effectively is around. You've got data analysis in your table and so on. Data input is a key issue as well. So you're saying you're releasing people from actually, but you still have to enter the data. So I'm just wondering, there is an implication here in terms of staff training as well. And I'm not sure, maybe I've missed it in the report, but I mean, that's clearly going to be an important aspect of this.
So we won't be releasing the people who input the data. It's releasing the resource that gathers that data together for report writing purposes or for trending purposes or analysis purposes. So we'll still have the same resource inputting data in the initial outset. This won't release that resource. won't release your frontline council tax officers, for instance. What it will do is release the gathering of that data to provide reports for senior leaders, for businesses, for members, and ultimately for the public. So that's where you'll initially get the savings. That resource will be released to provide some analysis on that data, and then actually look for where we can transform services, provide more efficient services and better services for customers.
Sorry, Grant and then Sue.
Thank you, Chairman. I get a little bit worried when Jan starts talking about cost-benefit analysis and all the rest of it, because I think he's going to steal my question. But no. Recommendation 2 talks about Cabinet to recommend to Council that funding for 22-23 is drawn from the corporate contingency. Looking at the budget here, just in the table, I think it would be 4.7. It talks about both councils funding this. So my concern is, where does Broadland's contingency sit, and as opposed to South Norfolk? Do we have lots of money, or do they have a little bit of money? Are we going to be funding this from contingency going forward in the years ahead? And will that contingency run out? Are we going to make a special provision for it in the future so that it's not coming out of contingency? It's just a question.
Thank you, Councillor Nurdin. In terms of the details around how that would work, I will defer to Rodney if that's okay. In terms of where we are proposing to draw from corporate contingency, we are just proposing that for year 22-23. So that's the in terms of the BDC share, that's just over the £20,000 you see in the report. The rest of the ongoing 4 years will proposing to be built into base budget, but I will just pass over to Rodney to answer the specifics, if that's okay.
So both councils maintain an independent contingency. So Broadland has a contingency each year, about £100,000 within its budgets to actually cover unexpected things that occur during the year as part of good, prudent management of the budgets. So this element would come out of that £100,000. The idea would then be for next year, it would be built into the base budgets as recommended in the report.
Thank you, Rodney. Sue was next.
Yes, two pieces really. Some information is qualitative rather than quantitative. So I'm hoping that we're not going to sort of assume that we can simply press a button and get an answer. I'd like some reassurance on that. That's the first point. And the second point is you talk about the organisation. I think we've had this slight issue before. We are two separate councils. When we had the police commander here last week, he was talking about the difference between things that are happening in South Norfolk and things that happen in Broadland. They are slightly different areas. So can you just reassure me that this whole system will take account of the fact that different requirements might be the case in each area, please?
In terms of the second point, thank you for your question, Councillor. Yes, the way we will gather the data will allow us always to visualise the data and analyse the data separately for the two councils. Where useful, we'll bring it together to provide an overall picture, but there'll certainly always be a view, which will be a Broadland view, which will allow us to, and some of the modelling and the testing we did, actually we produced different data sets from our homelessness and housing data, and there were slightly different reasons why people present and become homeless between the two councils. So absolutely recognise that it might be a different solution for the two councils.
I think just in addition to that point, I think what we're talking about isn't just on the district-wide level. Actually, there are differences within wards. So, at the next layer down, and the data and insight should allow us at that lowest layer to be able to aggregate that data up. So I think actually it's less about just the district area. I think it's about understanding their ward level information and how the wards differ between the districts and therefore the two councils and the organisations. Just referring to your first point around the customer side of things. So most definitely, what we would plan to do as part of data going forward is look at both your qualitative and your quantitative. You can't look at one without the other. So you'll know that in terms of our customer and insight approach that we brought forward a while ago, we're looking at how we gather that customer data through customer surveys, which is more of the qualitative data, to help us identify the full picture of a service provision and also service performance. So most definitely it's about both qualitative and quantitative.
Yeah, and just a little follow up on that. Of course, nothing is ever black and white, is it? So we do need to be clear that we are looking at the nuances behind certain things as well. So
I think some perhaps worth sharing that the way I see the data is it almost asks the question. It doesn't provide the answer. It starts to ask the question. What does this data mean? And if it's different between the two councils, do we understand why that is? And then that becomes a conversation where you bring in your qualitative and your analysis and what it works for the customer. So I'm not sure if that helps.
click the button and that will work. So thank you.
Jan?
Yeah, just one final point is you do mention in paragraph 4.7 about the difficulty of recruitment. Data analysts and data scientists, it's like in a lot of sectors, shortage, and so you talk about recruitment could be through various measures, and growing our own skills, or buying in specialist consultancy as needed. So I'm assuming that would then affect the figures you've got here in terms of the budget.
Thank you. The budget assumes that we'll need to go out and recruit, which is the most expensive option. The other options, which you quite rightly identify and that are in the paper, would be potentially less than we've quoted. So if we grow our own, we bring people in, say, on a graduate basis. Initially, there would be a lower cost because the graduate salary would be lower. However, if we wanted to retain that skill set at the end, then we'd still have the headroom in the money that we've asked for to be able to do that. Equally, we've allowed for the fact that it could be difficult to recruit at a particular time. So there's enough freedom in there to use some of our existing consultants to plug a gap for us, so it doesn't slow up the progress of the business intelligence service while we're recruiting. So I think we've left enough flexibility in there for that.
Thank you. Any more questions? No, I'll take us to page 38 and the recommendations. There are 3 recommendations. Proposed to take them on block. Everybody happy with that approach? Yeah. Everybody in favour? All bar 1. Against? Abstain? Thank you very much. Before we next go to the next agenda item, I'll just receive any declarations of interest from Steve Riley. No declarations. Thank you. So I'll move on to agenda item 11. That's page 39 of the Cabinet reports. And we have Nick presenting. Thank you, Nick.
Good morning, everyone. Just give me a moment to find my place on the papers. Forgive me. That's embarrassing, exciting. Okay, so
Nick, do you want to try your mic? Sorry.
Thank you. In relation to this report, this report presents then the slightly updated Norfolk Strategic Flood Alliance's strategy for annual re-ratification, 1 year on from the original ratification by Cabinet. Information is provided on just to outline how the Council and the wider Alliance is delivering against the strategy and against the wider needs for our communities facing potential threats of flooding. And just to summarise for you, The strategy ratified on 14th of September 2021 does require annual re-ratification, and that is really because it helps to keep a high-level action going across Norfolk for flooding. These more complex flooding problems don't fall to any one agency. They don't come under a statutory legal framework. There's not lots of funding just waiting to solve these problems. So it's a complex situation to solve, and that's really why the strategy was brought into existence. Progress is being made by the Norfolk Strategic Flood Alliance on a range of flooding actions within the Broadland district and across Norfolk, and Councillor Weinmark is your elected member representative on the board of the NSFA. Finally, to summarise, local action is being outlined at paragraphs 3.3 and 3.4 in your report. That's being taken across the district in collaboration with South Norfolk Council through posts dedicated to working with local communities to jointly tackle flooding awareness, prevention, and where necessary, mitigation and preparedness. Just to take you to the recommendation, Cabinet to ratify the Norfolk Strategic Flood Alliance Strategy 2022 as set out at Appendix 1, and to note the progress being made. Chair.
Thank you, Nick. Questions? I've got Grant. Any others? Sue and Jan. Great. Grant?
Thank you, Chairman. I know we went through this at the environment, I think it was the environment panel or one of the other ones, in quite a lot of detail. So I just want to know, with these being cabinet papers, it's just not really just technical maybe. The changes from the previous one to this one, I know we've asked as overview and scrutiny if we can have them something like a track changes so we can see what's the difference between what we ratified a year ago to what we ratified now. Is it possible to do it for not just for overview and scrutiny papers, but also for cabinet papers, because we're obviously looking at these papers? So that was the question. I just wanted to know if we were able to do that, not just for now, but in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, this is a paper on which there are minor amendments, primarily to well, across the board to the Norfolk Strategic Flood Alliance strategy. What I'm not in possession of at this point is, and probably because of the circumstances of the last 10 days or so, and the implications of that. So I don't have a compare and contrast between the last version and this version of the strategy so far, but the point is well made and noted for future reference. So where we say minor amendments, to have a background list of those minor amendments would clearly be helpful and informative to you. My apologies that you don't have that information this time, but we'll certainly take that note away.
Thank you, Sue.
That was exactly my question.
Okay, Jan.
Yep, thank you. From memory, I think the addition is around coastal flooding in this one, to incorporate coastal flooding, which is as far as I could see anyway, the main change, which is good. So no, it's good to see a more integrated approach. So fully support that. But I think, and I made the point in the Environmental Excellence Panel meeting as well about just an idea of progress, and that perhaps when we ratify next time, it would be good to see what progress over the previous year, because there's a lot of ambition here, but it's being able to say, well, have we achieved this, and is it actually working, this integrated approach? Hopefully it will be, especially with the additional resources, but it's being able to monitor that and see if we are actually making progress. I'm particularly concerned because one of the flooding issues in tranche 1 of these priorities to be addressed are in my ward, and it would be useful to know, without having to investigate, just exactly where we are in terms of progress on things like that. Thank you. Although I know I can always ask.
Thank you, Ken. Kelly?
Yeah, good morning, Nick. Nice to see you. I notice in here that, we're planning to have floodwater management officer. There's quite a number of councillors here sitting next to me and there who are on the boards of both the Norfolk Rivers and the Broads IDBs. I think it would be ideal for, as and when we get this floodwater officer, that he liaises with us because of our speciality knowledge. A lot of us have been on these boards for many years, and the insight that they provide is absolutely crucial to what this new position would be. So might I recommend that once we get this person in there, that we organise a meeting with the IDB board's members, please. Thank you.
Thank you. We have appointed to the role, so we have a person in post in the Flood and Water Management Officer role, finding their feet. They joined us from the lead local flood authority, so they've got the decent degree of experience. So Nathan Harris is our Flood Water Management Officer, and I'll make an action for them to meet with members who are representatives on the IDBs, so that you've got that information. Thank you.
Thank you. Stuart Clancy.
Thank you, Chairman. In relation to going forward with this, I mean, I think a lot of progress has been made as to where we were historically. However, the stumbling block I would suggest remains as the environmental agency. In terms of resourcing this initiative, how much of the environmental agency agreed to actually fund this in terms of hard cash? Any idea?
So the Environment Agency is a key partner to the Norfolk Strategic Flood Alliance. That might be slightly uncomfortable for a national agency to be on such a strategic local forum, but they've been a comprehensive player there. The respective agencies have different parts of the drainage network to be concerned with, and the Environment Agency is concerned with main rivers and with immediate feeders into main rivers. So those are their primary responsibility, and they've taken a key role, certainly in the priority tranche 1 and 2 sites, in coordinating potential solutions or investigations of flooding related problems. So the Environment Agency has been heavily involved. I can't speak to the broader question about what funding they bring specifically, but just to reassure you, they are a key part of the alliance and they're a fully signed up member.
Thank you. Any more questions? No, I'll take us to page 43, the recommendation 8.1. Take it as read. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Taking now to page 47 for agenda item 12. Nick, are you doing this one as well?
Thank you, Chair. No trouble finding my place for this next item. This report presents for Cabinet approval a proposed new dog fouling public space protection order. This comes under the Antisocial Behaviour Crime Policing Act 2014, and following public consultation would establish the replacement of the existing public space protection order on a like-for-like basis. Briefly, just to summarise, so the public space protection order is a mechanism by which the council can incentivise people to clean up after their dogs, and it provides the specific offence for fouling enforcement. So we can enforce for non-compliance. A public space protection order has a maximum duration of 3 years under law. The council must be satisfied that it's necessary and proportionate in order to make a public space protection order. And the decision is now required whether to approve a new one, either as is proposed or differently worded. Dog fouling does remain a key concern for our residents, and thankfully we don't have a large body of complaint about dog fouling, but we do know that there are local concerns around dog fouling. So we don't have hotspot areas largely and widely spread. However, we do have problems, and one that's been noted most recently concerns not so much dog fouling, although it does, but the leaving of dog bags, which is also an offence. So not to remove dog faeces forthwith to a receptacle is where the offence is stated. So to pick it up and then leave it in a bag is still an offence. Or hanging in a tree, as
yes.
You know, we've seen those examples, haven't we? So this legal control would require persons to clear up after their dogs if they foul on any public or private land to which the public space protection order applies. That will include public parks, pleasure grounds, sports grounds, playing fields, and play areas. Just to take you to the recommendation is that Cabinet approves the public space protection order number 3, as proposed at paragraph 4.5 and appendix 1 of the report, over the geographical areas identified in appendix 2, and that is the entirety of the Broadland district for a period of 3 years. Chair.
Thank you. So I saw Grant, Sue, Catchpole. Anybody else? Grant.
Thank you, Chairman. I know I asked this question about the Police and Crime Commission and not responding. and you did have a conversation with Chris apparently, and he's okay. He doesn't. If something were to go to court, would it be a requirement that they have some evidence of the fact that you have consulted? In other words, documented evidence of that they don't have a problem with it?
So, Chair, this relates to consultation and whether the police and the Police and Crime Commissioner have actively commented in response to a consultation. It is the policy of constabulary to comment by exception in cases where they've got something that they really wish to say. And clearly, the council has consulted properly. That means that we are entitled to legally make the public space protection order. Having made that order, it will not be subject to any technicalities or weaknesses if any other agency hasn't specifically commented. So we're satisfied it's a legally enforceable order. Chris, who was referred to, is Superintendent Chris Barnard, who has confirmed that from a district command point of view, there's nothing he would have wished the police to have commented on. So I think we're in a nice, safe place.
Thank you. Sue Holland, Catchpole, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I recently had the pleasure of having a walk with a dog around Horsewood Woods and then Broadland Country Park. We couldn't find a receptacle to put in the bag. We looked and we looked and we looked, and so I think we have to take our responsibility seriously and provide those bins so that the public can carry out their duty. Also, I have a question regarding horse faeces. Whilst walking around Broadland Country Park, there were numerous piles around the park path, in the middle of the path, and I wonder what the rules are regarding horse droppings and whether they should be cleared. Thanks.
Thank you. So in relation to the first question, dog walkers will be used to country walks in which they have to travel some way before they can put their dog fouling in a bin. Nonetheless, they should still clear up their dog fouling and then take it to the nearest bin. In country parks and woods, it's not that uncommon unless it's a very structured public place. It's not that uncommon that you might have to travel some way to a bin. Nonetheless, I will take that point away just in case there are any additional receptacles it would be wise to include based on your experience. I wasn't expecting your second question, I'll be honest. The threat posed by horse feces is somewhat less, substantially less than it is for dog feces. We don't get complaints very often about horse feces, and typically that's just a road clearance matter. If it is the case, I don't think we could justify the need and proportionality of putting that under a public space protection order, and it's not something I've seen happen elsewhere. I understand the point because some residents will express a concern. Some like to see horses, some don't like to see horse mess on the road, but it's not something we'd expect to cover under this particular public space protection order.
Thank you. Grant?
Broadland is responsible for clearing dog fowl bins, isn't it? Is that the case?
Broadland offers a collection service,
Yeah.
and it collects from bins, but it collects from bins. Sometimes it collects from bins as part of the statutory arrangements, and in other cases, bins are provided by parish councils, and then there's a financial arrangement agreed with parish council, and the collection is contingent on that arrangement taking place.
Yeah.
If a parish council were to increase the number of bins, then we would expect them to increase their arrangement with the district council for the emptying of those bins. Hope that helps.
Yeah, it's just that I'd noticed something in Jan's ward yesterday. There was a dog fouling bin, but it had a pile that high, almost double the size of the actual bin. And I don't know where people could put their dog fowl in that circumstance. So would they be subject to a penalty notice if they didn't put it in the dog fouling bins that are provided?
I think we've all occasionally seen an overfilled litter bin or dog fouling bin. That would indicate that people are complying with their duty to clear up dog mess, and that's exactly what we'd expect. Clearly, if we found on a regular basis that there was an overloaded bin, we would want to refer that to our services and see whether something could be done to increase the provision, possibly in consultation with the parish or town council, if that's appropriate. If someone has made the required effort to place their dog feces at the receptacle and when they arrive they find it full, they've done their very best, we certainly wouldn't be looking to take enforcement action for that matter. They've certainly removed the immediate threat to public health.
Further questions, I'd like to go to the recommendations on page 51. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Next, we'll move to agenda item 13, page 56. Debbie? Morning, Debbie.
Morning, Chair. So the report before you, as you're aware, back in May, both councils agreed to go ahead with the purchase of the Horizon Centre, and this report makes reference to Appendix P in that report. What this report here is seeking is a delegation to basically allow the leader and myself to award the contracts involved in the mobilisation of that piece of work. Once we own the Horizon Centre, obviously there's a piece of work there to carry out in terms of some of the surveys, identified some initial works that need to be done, but also fitting out that Horizon Centre so that it's able to be used. We know that there's massive benefits in us being able to move quickly in, no less because obviously, as with everybody's own bills, the heating and lighting at both the two existing council offices are increasing, particularly at South Norfolk House with oil, but also here with gas. So the ability for us to move quickly and to get in as quickly as possible is behind the reason or the rationale for this request. Also, as you'll know, the inflationary costs are going up. The cost of doing that work will continue to escalate if we don't move swiftly. So that's the rationale for this, and it's simply asking for a delegation to award those contracts that's in relation, but within the overall budget that members agreed in that original business case.
Thank you. Grant?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Debbie. I'm just thinking in terms of our contract standing orders. And I'm just wondering whether it wouldn't be a good idea, because this whole exercise of moving to the Horizon building is part of the portfolio of transformation and whatever the other parts of it are, that I know that the leader will be very involved in it, yes, but I would like to recommend that we include the portfolio holder for transformation and whatever the thing is, organizational development, as so that it's the consultation, not just between two people, but between three people. So that it's just a concern. I know I wouldn't include the finance portfolio holder because the budgets have been agreed. So that's why I wouldn't include finance. But I would rather have three people's heads together making those kind of decisions rather than just the two. Thank you.
Grant, are you putting that forward as a motion?
Yes.
Do we need to second her? So it's Ken Kelly. Okay. So any discussion just on that point of the motion of changing it to the
No,
to include?
not for me, because I think we're still in general debate at the moment.
We're dealing with this motion, Steve. This is
No, yeah, but what we're doing is point of order, Chair. Yeah, so I'm raising a point of order here. What the point of order is that there's been a move by Grant and then seconded by Ken in terms of an amendment. So I think what you're trying to do is now say, do we want to put that to the vote? And what I'm saying is a bit early to do that because we've had there's only been one contribution on debate at the
Councillor
moment.
Riley, can I just step in for a minute? What we're actually saying is on that point that Councillor Nurden has raised, is there any discussion on that point? We can then deal with that as a motion because you deal with that motion when that is put forward.
Yeah.
Is there any discussion on that debate? Then we take a vote on whether that's being put forward as a proposed recommendation for Cabinet to consider. Then we open back to full debate. We're just making sure that we're clear. At this point in time, we're discussing that proposed motion.
What proposed motion?
But surely, if once you get to the point of a motion, and there you then discuss whether that motion wants to be included. Once you conclude that, that is the substantive motion, and then you discuss the rest.
I understand the point being made there, but what I'm saying is usually you'd have had a debate, you'd have parked that, and you'd have gone, right, let's come back to that at the end because we've not had enough debate generally about the report. That's the point.
Okay. Well, I think that we're on it's only the addition of a portfolio holder to the recommendation. So I would just, I'm just going to continue. Is anybody have any discussions on the motion that's been put forward to allow the portfolio for transformation as amended in the, Nigel, then Sue.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think it is relevant. It says in consultation with the leader, and my colleague has suggested that the portfolio holder, the transformation be included as well. But is the same, sorry, rephrase the question. When you consult with our leader, do you simultaneously consult with the leader of South Norfolk? Or have we got two separate bodies almost pulling apart or pushing together? Because ultimately it's got to fit the needs of both councils. So will both leaders be involved with any discussion?
So that's a very good point. Yes, a similar report is going to Cabinet at South Norfolk next week. Yes, that at the moment has the same recommendations in that's in consultation with myself and the leader. But yes, it has to apply for both councils in terms of...
And they will both consult together with you?
Well, we're having joint meetings at the moment around it, but yes, both of them will be consulted on the same implications.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have Sue Holland, then Stuart. Anybody after that?
Yes, thank you. Yes, my concern is that I'm not convinced that we should be removing any form of monitoring by Cabinet, and I'm not convinced about the delegation process itself. So for me to actually be able to vote on whether it's 3 people or not is slightly irrelevant, because I'm not entirely sure I would want to vote for the whole process, if you see what I'm saying. So that's where I sit at the moment, I'm afraid.
Okay, Stuart.
Yeah, sorry, I apologise for my lack of being up to speed on this, but so we can make a informed decision on this. Could somebody just tell me what the total fit out budget is for the building, please?
I'm afraid we can't discuss figures because that was a confidential Appendix P in the original business case, which is why it's referred to in here so that members could look at that beforehand. But that still remains under confidentiality.
Yeah, but we can take that afterwards in the pink, below the line in the pink papers.
Yes, happy to discuss it in the pink papers afterwards.
Back on that. Again, I excuse my slight naivety, but how can we authorise any form of delegation when we don't actually know where we're starting from, Chairman?
It was in the papers that were previously submitted. Yeah, but those were in pink papers previously, so you'd have to read the minutes from those meetings. Yeah.
Chairman, can I offer a way forward? We've got 2 items here in line with our standing orders, and I absolutely appreciate what Councillor Holland is saying. I appreciate that. But in terms of our standing orders, when a formal amendment is made, we do have to deal with that in the room and then move on to substantive debate. Now, what we can do is the chairman can suspend those standing orders if he wishes to, so that we park that, and then we'll come back to that later if the committee would like us to do that. I just need to make sure that we follow our standing orders as they stand. And then in relation to the point that Councillor Clancy says, if we do want to go into figures, which was on the report that was received previously, then we can go to below the line, pause the live streaming, have that conversation, then come in back into public session once you've talked through those figures for the recommendation to be discussed and agreed. So I think there's 2 points there that we just need to agree a way forward on.
Chair, yeah, on that point of order again, because my interpretation of standing orders is not exactly the same as yours, Emma, and the reason
Steve,
for that is...
I am the monitoring officer,
No,
so
I
I
know
have
that,
to make...
Emma, but what I'm talking about is you've sat there with me in the past, we've had exactly the same scenario. Quickly on in the beginning of the meeting, you may have had a proposition or amendment. We then parked that, completely agreed with by everybody that's sitting up this top of the end, because we said, we've not enough debate, we park that to the end. And when we get to the end to move to recommendation off the report, we say we'll now put to the vote the amendment before you put that to the vote. So you can choose to do it either way. You can choose to do it now, or you can choose to do it at the end. There's nothing in standing orders which predicts which way to do it. That was the only point, Chair.
The standing orders do set that up. As I iterate, I've just given the chairman a way forward so we can decide what way we want to take this.
Okay, so in line with what Emma suggested, how do you look to do that?
Can I just have a clarification from Debbie here? We're saying that South Norfolk are going to have the same type of agenda. Are they going to? What if they don't ask for, an independent member to join with the leader and yourself there? How are we going to resolve this? Are they going to be the same as us, or are we going to be the only ones with the extra member? Just like clarification.
It's entirely up to South Norfolk who they decide to delegate to. The paper currently is as written here to the leader and myself. But as your 2 independent councils, you can make your own decisions on who you would like to have that delegation to.
So, sorry, I think before we go on, what we'll do, I think the best option here is to park the motion just for the moment, go to the substantive debate. So, and then we'll come back to this afterwards. And again, if we get to the point where we're asking about figures which are below the line, then we'll have to take it to the exclusion of press and public later on in the meeting.
We can do it now.
Yeah.
We just exclude the press and public now.
Okay. So we'll go back to the substantive motion still before us, and so I've got.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose that we hold this discussion until we're below the line, because I don't really understand how we're supposed to have the discussion without having the figures. And when I asked for the figures, I got referred back to the minutes of some meeting held back in May, and I've got an issue with that. So please, could we hold this until we are below the line, and then we can discuss the topic sensibly? Thank you.
So, Chairman, if I propose, if we go to exclude the press and public now, what we will need to do though is come back into open session, because the report is an open report. So we'll need to have the below the line conversation, then come back into open session for the recommendation. Then we'll then go back into closed session for the rest of the meeting, just so that members are clear. That's how we'll take that forward. Is there anything else that anyone wants to discuss in the open forum before we exclude press and public? No? Okay, Chairman.
Okay. So I'm going to ask for exclusion of the press and public. I move that the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the remaining items of business, because otherwise information which is exempt information by virtue of paragraph 3, part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, as amended by the Local Government Access for Information Variation Order 2006, would be disclosed to them.